Greetings, everyone. Here we are at the final Q&A session for 2024. Before we get into it, I want to thank everybody who's taken time to submit questions and engage with dialogue over on our Patreon group. If you want to contribute to the work that I'm doing, you can do so for as little as $3 a month, and that does give you access to our Q&A sessions, which I think is pretty cool. If you want to fast forward ahead to a specific question, you can go down into the video details below and just click on the thing you want to hear about, which I think is cool. This month, I have chosen 3 of our question submissions to do here in a video, and hopefully these are interesting to you as they have been for me, and a big thanks to everybody who submitted. So we will start with Maria, who asks, do plants have gender? I love this question. Some plants I meet, I feel them always as masculine, some feminine, and for some it's like they're both, but it depends on which aspect they present to me at certain times, or should I say which aspect they feel they should bring me at a certain point in time. So I will say this. Biological sex definitely exists in the plant kingdom, right? We know that some plants express biologically female, some plants express biologically male, some express biologically hermaphroditic, and that's all cool. Moving out of the biological sex of things and into the spectrum of gender, I will say this. I don't particularly think plants have a fixed gender, but I definitely experience what you are bringing up in this question, that for some reason, certain plants that I sit with, without even thinking about it, I will start referring to them as he or she, right? I haven't put intentional thought into it. I haven't asked the plant specifically how they want to be addressed. It just happens very naturally in the process. And I really actually love when I think of a plant as being very, sort of masculine or having a masculine presence, and that, kind of intuitively and organically that plant in my own work, I kind of think of them as masculine and I use masculine pronouns, but then I meet somebody who's total opposite. And one really good example of that is juniper, right? I've always thought of juniper as being this very, martial, masculine presence, but I know plenty of people, if not most of the people who I know who sit with juniper, get a more feminine energy from that plant. So I think that's that. I don't think they have a fixed gender, but I do agree that they present energies to us that individually we interpret as more masculine or more feminine or more, mixed or in the middle or something other. And I do think that it's part of their signature. It's part of their medicine, the way they show up. It's part of the big way in which they communicate, and it's meaningful too. That if you feel that a plant has a particularly feminine energy, that's just another layer of how that plant is communicating something to you, which I think is cool. So thank you, Maria. Fantastic question, as always. Spencer asks, do you have any suggestions for dealing with eczema with herbs, particularly on the backs of the hands? I know this may be more complex than can be addressed in a video, but are there a few things to try or ways of thinking about eczema that are useful when working with herbs? Fantastic question. You probably know from being around here that I don't love doing broad spectrum herbalism, but there is definitely a way for us to have conversations around some of these things and start thinking about how we might approach them, what the energetics might be, what the herbs that we might want to look at first could be. If nothing else, when we look at the energetics of an established set of symptoms, okay, and we're going to go in the weeds for just a second. When we talk about a disease name or a disharmony name or an illness name like eczema, that word is just a placeholder for a set of symptoms that is consistent enough that when we say eczema, we know the following 4 or 5 things are most likely to be the case, right? There's most likely to be some plaquey expression on the skin, and maybe there's itching, and maybe there's dryness, and maybe there's an autoimmune component, right? And so instead of having to list all that out, allopathic medicine gives one term to a consistent set of symptoms, and that's what the disease name is. From a spiritual perspective of herbalism, we can still use those little shortcuts because they're helpful. And here in the clinic, people will come to me and say, I've been diagnosed with XXX, right? And I say, oh, well, that already helps me know something about what you're probably experiencing. I'm still going to break it down, right? We always want to say, what does your version of eczema feel like? What does eczema look like and feel like in your body? Because how one person might describe heat, dryness, flakiness may be totally different to how another person might experience those energetics. And they're all very, very meaningful. So, that's the part where I would pick it apart one-on-one with somebody. But again, we could at least start the conversation here. And another cool aspect of this is sometimes with broad spectrum herbal medicine, which I'll share some ideas with you, Spencer, here in a second, is we can use the herbs as an assessment tool, as a diagnostic tool. And we can say, 9 out of 10 people I work with have found that this particular herb or this particular energetic profile in a plant medicine has been effective. So let's try that with you and see how your body responds. And how your body responds will actually help us dial it in tighter if we need to, right? If we add coldness, or herbs that move upwards, or really aromatic herbs, and the body responds a certain way, you can say, oh, that actually tells us a lot, right? If the body reacts to it, we can say, oh, that's definitely not the right direction. If the body responds affirmatively, then we say, oh, that's the right direction. Let's keep on it, or let's tweak it, dial it in a little bit. We do that all the time, right? Sometimes in the moment with a facilitated dosing of an herb to see how the body responds, how the demeanor changes, the pulse changes, the posture shifts, the hama, the energy expression of the body shifts. Sometimes we have somebody sit with an herbal formula for a couple weeks and we say, let's see what happens. Okay, so let me give you some places to start. First, whenever I see red, plaquey, geographic expressions on the skin anywhere, back of the hand, around the face, perioral dermatitis, eyelids, wherever it shows up, I always will start with some kind of an assumption that the body is trying to push something out via the pathway of least resistance. It's usually based in the blood, right? So for whatever reason, the body is trying to release something, whether that's a physical something like a toxicity or a pharmaceutical buildup or anger or resentment or heat. And for whatever reason, the skin feels like the pathway of least resistance for the body. The body's like, the quickest way to get rid of this isn't to send it out in the urine, which we love, to send it out in the stool, which we love, right? Those are both pathways of elimination that are eliminatory. That's what they do. But the body says, let's push it out through the skin, right? Which to me is always a little bit of a red flag, because we say, why is the body not using an established pathway of elimination? Why is it choosing to move all of this stuff out of the back of your hands? That's not a very ecological, way to do things. It's actually probably taking a great deal of energy, but the body feels for one reason or another that that's the best route. So the first thing that we want to consider is, how do we support the fact that what we see on the skin reflects what's happening in the blood? We want to cleanse the blood. And we don't want to do that with anything heroic, right? When there's an eczema, psoriasis, keratinosis, perioral dermatitis, tinea versicolor, any of these things we see on the skin that reflect a blood signature, in my opinion, in my practice, I don't want to say, oh, now's a great time for you to go do a hardcore blood cleanse. No, right? The body's already trying to figure something out in kind of a wonky way. So we do a gentle blood cleanse. And the best way to do that is with our approachable, mildly diuretic, mineral dense, weedy herbs. W-E-E-D, weedy herbs. Think about weeds, So we think about dandelion and burdock and nettles and chickweed and cleavers. We think about red clover. You're literally thinking about the herbs that most people consider weeds, right? Because these are the plants that show up where there is an accumulating amount of toxicity. There's an accumulating amount of heat. And they do it on the land, and they'll do it on the land of the body as well. So we start out with, in my opinion, if I had to give one person experiencing eczema one herb to sit with to get that response from the plant, to learn a little bit more, to peel the onion, to go a little deeper, it would be burdock root. So you can get burdock root tincture, you can get burdock root capsules, you could get some of the really lovely coffee alternatives that are herbal based, right? They have ones with burdock and roasted chicory and roasted dandelion, all weedy plants, and start sipping on that. And in addition to very gentle blood cleansing, with burdock specifically, I'm speaking about here, you're going to get a couple of other things. You're going to get the pacification and the clearing of any liver heat, right? So if the reason why the blood is trying to express what it's expressing through the skin is that the liver, for some reason, cannot efficiently clean the blood. Now, this is oftentimes something we see with a little bit of inflammation from alcohol use, some pharmaceuticals, right? Anytime the liver just struggles with getting everything clean, and it could be emotional too, it doesn't have to be a physical thing. We want to help the liver. So burdock is going to clear and cool the liver, get the heat out of the liver so the liver can be more efficient. It's going to gently start cleansing the blood. And burdock is also slightly demulcent. So there's going to be this moistening, cooling, lubricating, hydrating energy to burdock that does move outward into the skin. And for people who deal with these plaquey conditions like eczema, psoriasis, that's the energy they generally want, right? They want cooling, soothing, moistening. They want all the topical creams and lotions because it feels good and it generally makes the skin look well. So we start gentle, right? Start with a burdock and see what happens. The other thing you can do is work with another plant that I love, borage, topically, just topically, right? And actually, there is a fantastic product that you can get at most health food stores, right, called borage therapy. And it's a lotion, just comes in a nice little easy lotion container, but it's based in borage oil. It's an oil-based lotion. And what that will do is kind of quiet the skin and allow that expression to finish. We never want to push it back in. We're never trying to, so many of the products that are available for eczema work by pushing the manifestation back into the body, and then the body has to go, well, shit, now we got to find another way to try to deal with this, right? We don't want that. We want to let it happen. This is a great one. So you could do just borage oil if you can find it, or this borage therapy lotion. It's very easy to find, very affordable as a topical, just get some support. But start with burdock. See how that feels. Cool, soft, moistening is the energy, right? Cleansing the blood, supporting the liver. Stop there. Thank you for that question. It's fun to talk about this stuff sometimes. Let's see. Heather, what are ways that we could incorporate plant spirit allies into a shadow work practice? We love it this time of year. This could also apply to what one could do as part of their therapy protocol as well. That's fantastic. I think there are opportunities before, during, and after emotional work, but curious as to your thoughts. So this has come up in other classes as well, but I have herbs that I think if you're going to talk therapy, if you're going to go do the cognitive behavioral therapy, the mindfulness and acceptance, the CPT, the EMDR, whatever, there are herbs that I would think would be exceptional allies to take into that session with you, right? And hopefully you have somebody who's like cool with you doing that. And if not, you just do it in the car before you go in. And I think you could approach this in two different ways. you could look at the plants that live in the shadows, right, that have figured out how to thrive in places that are maybe a little bit dark, that are maybe a little bit frozen, that are maybe dug in a little bit. You know, a big one for me, this is surprising to a lot of people, but you will actually see this referenced in somebody who I love very much, which is Robin Rose Bennett. She will talk about this plant in this way as well, dandelion. Dandelion is an incredible ally, a Hecatean herb, by the way, very unexpected to a lot of people, that when you get into Hecatean plant lore, dandelion comes up, right? That this is a plant wrapped up in Hecate. I think, Heather, you and I have maybe even talked about this before with this plant. So I forget when I get to bring that up, but we can think about the herbs that have figured out how to thrive in those spaces. So if you feel like you're in a cold, shut down space, what plants can thrive there? If you're in a dark place, what plants can thrive there? That's one way to do it, and I love dandelion for that. You could also think about the opposite. Which plants bring in the light, bring in movement, bring in release, bring in the resolution of blockages and stagnation? Again, how does it feel to you? Right? What does whatever you're working on feel like to you? Do you feel frozen, stuck, disconnected, you know, whatever the thing is? And we think, well, what plant brings in the virtues that speaks to the solution, right? So this is an interesting one because if we pick on, let's say, broadly pick on depression. And there are, by the way, hot, fiery kinds of depression. There are cold, frozen kinds of depression. That's probably the most common. But when people experience depression with intense emotional flux and anxiety, oftentimes that depression feels more fiery than it does cold. But that's neither here nor there. So we think of St. John's wort, right? Hypericum as the penultimate herb for depression. But really, St. John Hypericum is a light bringer. This is a plant that comes into the body, finds places where we have become fully encapsulated in darkness, in coldness, and kind of being buried, and starts to shine a light and warm up and move and stimulate and circulate, right? So we can reintegrate and get that part of ourselves back. We could think about Huanpi, Albizia julibrissin, right? Flowers or bark, or if you're me, flowers and bark, Huanpi, Huanhua together. This is a plant of connection, of taking the parts of us that have been disconnected from the collective and plugging us back in, right? So if the issue is we feel disconnected, if we feel shut out, if we feel alienated or lonely, we want this particular plant to help us come back in, right? The poetic name of Huan, right, is the herb of collective happiness, right? Therein lies the medicine. So, you know, also the cardiovascular herbs are very smart to bring in. The linden, the motherwort, the hawthorn, the arjun, you know, whichever one is appropriate for you, whichever one you feel called to, that's safe for you to work with internally. Whatever we put into the heart center, we pump into every part of our being, even the parts of us that are really hard for us to get to normally, like our shadowy parts, our repressed parts, our hidden parts, right? The heart will go there. The heart is going there. It has to. So I've told people many, many times, if you are starting therapy, if you're starting some self-reflective work, whatever, work with hawthorn. Like, soften that space, drop into the liminal point, expand the work into every part of your body, and go into those sessions, pre, during, post, whatever, with that extra heart-centered support, right? The heart ultimately is the seat of all this stuff. Even when we think that mental health issues that are not organic or chemical Our mental, those issues to me are heart issues, right? If it's an organic issue or a chemical issue, it could very well be cerebral, literally in the brain, right? But everything that's not that, all those kinds of anxieties and sadnesses and disconnects and all that, to me, I stop thinking about it being literally mental health and I start being about the processing health in the heart. So bring in the light where you feel like you need light. Get inspired and nourished by the plants who do well, who thrive in the places where you currently feel stuck or challenged. Maybe both, right? There's ways to bring them in both. The list is massive. I would love to do a full materia medica right now on plants to look at, but we talked about dandelion. We talk about albizia, all the cardiovascular, tonic cardiovascular herbs, hawthorn. And when you work with hawthorn in this case, try to work with the entire tree. Flowers, berries, and leaves all together, right? Not just one. Easy to find hawthorn berry tincture. Try to do all three if you can. Motherwort has their own specific ways of plugging into heart center work when we're going through stuff. Linden, right? Softening, moistening, lubricating. Arjun, astringing, calling in, tonifying, and strengthening. Who else could we talk about? You talk about cinnamon. You talk about hypericum, St. John's, light circulator, lemon balm, Melissa officinalis. Lemon balm is honeybee medicine. Melissa, honeybee. Okay, this is like a plant that I think about when we have lost our honey in life. We have lost our passion, our purpose, the thing that gets us out of the hive, out into the world, the nectar, right, of things. When people are stuck on the couch, right, or they're stuck in bed and they can't get back out there, this is Melissa medicine. So we've talked about this before. There's classes, a couple of advanced workshops on Patreon that you can access, where we talk about how these emotional, mental, energetic, spiritual aspects of the herbs, we can learn to find them by approaching the more commonly presented physical virtues of the plants, right? So most of the time when we talk about herbs, we talk about how they affect us physically, what they do for the lungs, for the brain, the eyes, the digestion, right? Very little when we get into the subtler spaces of our emotional states, our mental states. But hidden in the physical language is all of that, right? We just have to learn how to think about it. So there are bigger classes where we get to go like all the way into that stuff. And I eat it up. I love thinking about the plants in this way where we take the brakes off, right? And we say, there's no reason ever that we should assume that hawthorn has a medicine that is limited to the physical, functional cardiovascular system. That when we take that herb, somehow that herb exists in the cardiovascular vacuum and can only do anything on the physical level of the heart, when intuitively and ancestrally and folklorically, we all know there are many layers to what we call the heart. And we experience that hawthorn, especially when invited in, right, and given that permission, will flood out into those other layers. It will flood out into the emotional heart, where we hold love and grief and loss and trauma, right? It will flood out into the heart of our life narrative, the things that we are passionate about, the things and the people we love, and it will move medicine into those spaces, right? So pulling the brakes off all the time and letting the plants do the big thing that they do, and not limiting them in any way. Because if we limit them, they remain limited. This is why all of our ancient animist-rooted traditions have sorcery. This is why sorcery exists, right? The Galder, the charming, the speaking prayers and affirmative statements, the different types of magic, the different types of ritual, The only reason these things exist is because the universe operates on laws of permissibility. If our allies, ancestors, deities, plants, didn't need us to be permissive to say yes for things to adjust, then we wouldn't need sorcery at all, right? Things would just happen to us all the time, right? Without our consent. But what we find is when we step into these more spiritual spaces, these more sorcerous kinship based spaces, that we say yes to the things that we want. We allow for the plant to go wherever they need to go in love and trust. We allow for the deities that we work with to reflect on us, whatever it is that we need to see. And those things happen. And that's partly because of permissibility, of spiritual consent. But the deeper level is that by allowing for those possibilities to happen, by saying yes to them and stepping into a space of love and trust with them, we actually create the room within ourselves for the change to happen in the first place, right? If we come at it with Hawthorne can only work on the physical level of my cardiovascular system, then we have only, within the tissues of our body, we have only created space for those effects to happen on the tissue-based level. And that's really the only place they will happen. When we come at it and say, Hawthorne medicine can go wherever it goes, and I trust that that medicine will be good medicine, then it can go anywhere it wants. We've relaxed enough to let it flow, right? This is why sometimes in clinical practice, the first medicine that we will give people is some version of a nervine, stimulating nervine, tonifying nervine, calming, relaxing nervine, so that we can help the person let go and create space between their cells for the plant spirit to move through and stir some stuff up, right? So tangent, you got a tangent. This is posting on January 31st, 2024. So this is literally for reals this time. I said it in this week's community class, the last tangent of the year. There you go. Thank you guys so much for your continued support, for an amazing year of questions. We did so many good questions this year. All the Q&A sessions are posted on my YouTube channel for everybody to watch. It's so cool to see what you guys are thinking about, what you're working on, what you're struggling with, what you're attaining success-wise. It's very cool. I love this very much. I look forward to seeing what 2025 brings us. Take care. See you.